Hello Dabblers, JP here with another hobby video, this time going into my conversion approach to making my Kings of War Goblins. So if you want to watch me try and make a Winggit for my Kings of War Goblins, then please watch on. Now, this won't be news to the people that have watched us for a while now, but you might be aware of the fact that this channel has a wide range of stuff on it. Well, actually, from two opposite ends. It has my Kings of War hobby content, and it has my wife's stitching content. So as long as you don't mind a little bit of one or the other appearing in between what you're interested in, then I think we'll all be happy subscribers. Now, on to the content of today. So what I'm trying to do today is convert up some Winggits for my upcoming Goblin army. And so to get you an idea of the headspace that I'm in when I'm coming up with these goblins, I've brought in some of the multi-bases I've been working on for my Goblin Rabble and Sharpstick units. So what you can see here in the background, so I'll bring them to the front, move that Winggit out of the way, you can see here this kind of village setup I've got going. So this is a Horde multi-base, and so what I've got is this little fairy village hut from a local hobby store called Spotlight. It's a craft store, and they had these little fairy village things I saw, and I thought, oh, like, they look a bit cute, but if I repainted them, I definitely could make them a bit creepy. So I wanted to make kind of a goblin village look in the forest. So everything has to be rather organic. So they're not actually little huts. Like this is a mushroom little hut. And then I have another one. Oh, it's quite heavy. I have this one here, which is made from obviously a tree stump kind of hut, you know, with a quaint little door and little garden path that I've put down there. So that's the kind of look I'm going for, is imagine the fairy tales gone wrong, or if you will, the original style that the Brothers Grimm had intended for their fairy tales. They weren't supposed to be all happy endings, or at least nice. And then this one is just making use of that old Battle for Skull Pass terrain that came with it, so I've just embedded it here in this multi-base, and so that looks pretty good as well. So with that in mind, since I'm going for a very foresty, organic, creepy look, the Kings of War models are great for goblins, and so I've actually got quite a few. I've got a lot of the I've got a few trolls, as you've seen in my unboxing video. I have some of the regular rabble as well. That's what I've built them as. And that's fine, you know, goblins are goblin, they can be varied. But when it came to the Winggits, I felt that the look of an actual ramshackle kind of plane, while fun and perfectly on point for Kings of War goblins in the Panathor universe, my particular goblins in their creepy forests, it didn't quite work because a plane requires certain infrastructure to work well, and that kind of stuff's not available in a forest. So what I was then thinking was, then what else could they fly upon that would be more you know, creepy, foresty, fairy tale like, and so it required me to turn to the 3D printing world, and so that's where I came across this. So what I have here is from Mythforged, and I think they're the only ones that had it available, at least on Etsy. So Etsy.com was where I found this, and this, as you can see, is a giant crow. And it perfectly fits this monster base, which is the size of base that a Winggit occupies. And so my plan is not just to have this crow as it is, but to put a goblin on it so that it really looks like a Winggit. So these will be the basis for my Winggit, starting with this giant crow that will then have a goblin riding it. And so that's what I have all these pieces here arrayed on my workspace to make a goblin rider. And so the idea is that these goblin riders fly around shooting what I will have is explosive arrows at their opponents. And so that's kind of trying to fit all the gaps for the Winggit, because the Winggit can fly, yes, but it also has a ranged explosive attack with firebombs. And so I needed some way of showing that, and while I could try and craft my own little potion bottles and stuff for him to lob, I decided instead to actually make use of the spare bows I have left over from the Goblin kit, the Kings of War kit, because I mean these bows are awesome. Look at it. And I didn't want to, I've got plenty of Games Workshop archers, so I didn't want to use those. So instead, I have decided to try and use some of these bows, of which I have many, to make the rider for my Winggit. So I have two of these, but I'll just make one today. and see how I go turning this into a convincing Winggit. Because the way I approach conversions is if I am going to go to the effort of doing one, I want to make it good enough that people don't feel like I've cheated my way into getting it. You know, essentially you don't want to be the equivalent of having a paper army. A paper army is good for testing, but when you're turning up and you have just some crummy conversion and you're saying this is my X or Y powerful unit, people feel a bit cheated. But if you've put together enough effort, then people don't mind so much, I find. That's in my experience. So that's what I'll be doing today. So, what do I need to make this convincing? So what I have here are a few different bits. Obviously I've got the components of my goblin, so I've got his legs. So some legs, these are Wolf Rider legs. You know, if you're familiar with the Games Workshop Wolf Rider kit, Wolf Rider body, and then we have some various heads. I didn't realize how just shockingly large Games Workshop goblin heads are, because when you compare them to the size of the Kings of War goblins, you think the Kings of War goblins are actually kind of big, but when you put their head on it, the head is huge. I mean, look at it when I put it on this body. How ridiculous is that? The head is just oversized to a crazy degree. But in any case, I will be using these heads because these are the only heads that will easily fit this body, which has that protruding headpiece there, you know, where the head occupies. So if I want it to fit like so, I need to have that there. So yeah, that's how I have to use it. I have to use these giant heads, and that's okay. But personally, I'm preferring the Kings of War range of goblins in terms of their looks. But these are the spare parts that I have. Now, so I've got the actual goblin, and I've got the bow that he'll be firing from. I've also got an arrow which he'll be holding. So another cool thing about let's try and get that. So another cool thing about the Kings of War Goblin kit is it comes with actual separate arrow holding hands, like so. So that could be laid across the bow as it's about to fire. To make it look like an explosive arrow, I will actually be removing that arrowhead and replacing it with some spare tyrannid bits. So this tyrannid bit is, I think, the adrenal gland. You know, and it's essentially just a bulbous thing that has a taper. There we go. It's just a bulbous thing with a taper. If I paint that in a fiery manner, you know, oranges and reds and yellows, you will not be able to tell that it is actually an adrenal gland, because it will be sitting on the tip of an arrow with the taper facing upwards as fire would. So the interesting thing is I can't actually put in this conversion this bit on until the very end, because I won't really be sure which way is up. And I want it to be convincing, otherwise it doesn't look like fire, does it? So, let's get started with the conversion. I've already kind of tried to remove as much of the flash from these as possible. And I've also tried to dry fit some things, so I don't just stuff things up as I'm doing it here. So, for instance, you know, the goblin can sit quite easily there, straddling the shoulders, I guess, of the crow. I'm not really good with crow anatomy or bird anatomy, so if any the ornithologists can help correct me. So, for instance, the goblin will be sitting like so, pretty convincing. Then, what I have cut up here, these are leftover netters, right? So in Kings of War, obviously, I don't need goblin netters. I had kept so many goblin netter bits just to make more night goblins back in, well, many years ago, back when netting was important. Now it's not, so what I can use this for is actually to make it look like he's got some kind of mesh about him, you know, so part of his kit, I suppose. So if I put that there, and then I grab another one that I've also cut up. So these were once whole nets, and I've cut away the arms and shaved away the hand that was holding it there. So if I put both of them there, I think I'll probably need to. Yes. So you can see this one hasn't been trimmed of all of its little moons. But what I do need to do is I do need to remove that little middle moon. There we go. Give that a bit of a file. So what I'm trying to do here is give it a mesh, you know, something that he's kind of, it looks like he's sitting on it, because I can't actually put anything underneath him, because as you can see, his legs are already, you know, fully straddling it. If I try and put anything underneath there and I have to bend the legs out, it'll look like he's pretty much doing the splits, and I don't want that look. So, oops, so instead what I will be doing is putting the mesh behind him to make it look like it's kind of part of the seat. Glue that on like so. So this is the idea. This is kind of a dry fitting. So let's see, do they fit together? No, I might need to clip in between them. See, they're kind of coming together. So let's just do that. Because also this mesh is going to be what then will allow me to glue on quivers. He's got to get his arrows from somewhere, he can't just have them on his back. So the idea is you'll have these quivers sitting right there next to him. They can't be stuck to the feathers of this great beast, so instead they will have to be on something, and so in this case we've got the netting. So essentially he's got a netting around the shoulders of this raven, this giant crow raven, and so that will be his supports. So let's try and glue that on and see how we get along. So that first net on the left went on relatively painlessly, but then it was the next one that required lots of filing down to get it nice and flat. And as I was editing this video, I realized that most of it was just looking at me attempting to fit this on for about 15 minutes. So I decided to cut this down quite a bit and speed it up and then put in this voiceover so that there's something a bit more enjoyable. But I guess the long story short is that you should really dry fit pieces quite a lot. Maybe cut them up before you start a video where you talk about how to make them. But I guess you can kind of see the journey here and how annoying it is to try and get these things to stick. I guess part of the problem with this crow model, and it's not to do with the crow model itself, it's just the fact that there's lots of detail in the feathers. They're all protruding. It's not a smooth surface on which to glue, so trying to get the contact between the net and the feathers, there's just not that much to go with. But you can see now that they're finally fitting, so I can actually get on with the rest of the conversion. So again, it's plastic, but we're going to go stick them to resin. So we'll use super glue. And for most people, this is very general common knowledge, is duh. But in case we have anyone new, some of these things are just not apparent. You just don't know what the difference is between plastic cement and super glue. And while I think super glue can probably be used in all cases, plastic cement definitely cannot. Alright, so now we have the goblin on there. Well, the goblin's feet. So that's pretty good. So next up on this, we have the goblin's body. His chest. So essentially I've grabbed pretty much two identical chests, just some lightly armored Goblin Wolf Rider. This I will use plastic cement, because when you can use it, I recommend you do, because it seals things together. Not so good if you want to tear things apart again, but when you want things to stay together, it's fantastic. There we go. So we've got that body on there. Looks cool. Let that dry a bit. Meantime, we can apply some quivers. So these are quivers acquired also from the archer bits, the spitters bits from the goblin kit, the goblin plastic kit from Kings of War. So if we want to put them on, got to imagine if I could just stop dropping it, where it would be. Definitely hard to get it in there and maintain my grip. So where it would be best served, and I think right there would be where he would want to grab it. Now, it does have a minor contact with the netting, so I think I can get away with using this glue. Now, which side is the most visually interesting? Yeah, the other side. Let's try it. Because the plastic cement, in general, is much more effective at maintaining a hold, but with only other plastic. But if I have to resort to some super glue, that's fine. That's pretty good. Yeah, it looks pretty stable. Let's do the other side. Needs to be able to grab from both sides. Another quiver. Sticking it on the end there. As if they're literally hanging on. They're stuck to the netting. But I do want to keep them out of the way of his arms because I might have trouble sticking his arms on. There we go. That's done. So they're going to be a bit delicate until they dry fully. But how's that body? Reasonably solid. Let's try and stick on some arms. I'm always very impatient when it comes to this. Now the question is, do I want to go for... Let's try and dry fit here. How do I get this arrow hand, this drawn arrow, onto the bow? So let's see. Put that there. Like so. No, that's not the right combination. It must be this one. The extended bow arm with the arrow. I suspect that the difference in dimensions between the goblin bodies from the Rabble kit mean I will not be able to align this like so. Essentially I would like that, you know, like you have in the Rabble kit, capable of like that, where it's lining up. But I do not believe that this giant goblin body will afford me such luxury. So instead I might opt for this one where it's holding it, ready to fire. And we can just put it on like, ooh, it's all blurring out. So we can just put it on like that. So there, and there. Or indeed, this one. Because I really like this one. I like it with all the nasty spikes. Beautiful goblin bow. Really, it looks very goblin-like. So that there, that there. Looks like he's just rejoicing in having hit something. Which, fair enough. Goblins are pretty poor shots. Okay, let's stick this one on. So, just stick that on there. just have to be cognizant of the giant head that needs to sit behind that bow. So, is there enough room for a giant head? Let's find out. Let's put that giant head on there. I'm thinking this one, because he has a skull on his head as if it's a helmet. So it looks like he's ready to go into aeronautical combat. So let's put that head in and adjust the bow as we need to. Oh, looks like he's kissing the bow. Alright, let's move that arm up. Kissing his bow. Definitely creepy, but not what I'm after. Oh, maybe we can use this bow. See, I'm a very rapid gluer. You know, maybe I should wait a bit longer for things to dry, but oh, can't be bothered. But I will have to wait to dry before attempting to do the arrowhead. Okay, how's that arm looking? Not quite. There we go. Just trying to get the anthropology right so that his limbs look roughly correct. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. It's got his arrow ready, which will have its flaming tip instead. Bow raised. And we've got his quivers either side. Perfect. Well, I'm quite happy with that, actually. What do you think of that? I think that's quite a Goblin Winggit. Okay. I'll just let that arm dry, and I'll stick that adrenal gland on, so it looks like a flaming bolt that will explode through, you know, whatever concoctions the goblins use. Now, what will eventually go on there at the end is not only the flaming bolt, but I also have bought some leather rope. So here, right? It's quite slender leather, supposed leather rope. So what are we using this for actually is just to add some strands around him to make it look like he's held in by something. You know, because he's not just going to sit up there all fine by himself. So I think what I will do is I'll cut a few lengths of this and use some super glue to try and adhere it in ways that convincingly look like this crow has been properly saddled in a way. He's not sitting in a saddle, but at least there's something holding everything there. So let's see how that goes. Grab some lengths of this. So for instance, what if I were to put some here? Okay, so if I wanted to go behind his foot, there we go, so something like that. Starts to look a little bit more legitimate. So that's not actually fixed there whatsoever. So let's try and make it fixed. I'm going to super glue on one end. Just fixing there. I need to shorten it just a little bit. A little bit of glue where I think it'll go. Oh, poor glue's been battered. I find that these glues just never get through 100%. You always, to get the last few bits out, you really have to abuse them. Is that everyone else's experience? Let's hide that tip. There we go. There. Somewhat saddled. Looks like that this whole thing actually has some kind of structure. Who'd have thought? Now, the question is to have another part go around the back or not. Loop around the wings. Now, I would expect if you wanted to keep it in place, you probably have to have some kind of strapping going around the wings as the crow flies, which would only be visible under here, and then coming up to meet there. So maybe we should try. See how that looks. But then equally, it could just be hidden under the wings there, like underneath these massive feathers. Would you really see the ropes? Probably not. Really just seeing that front rope is probably convincing enough. Now, what keeps the goblin there is another question. Do I need to put a rope around him that then connects him to his netting? Well, I have a lot of rope. I can just see it's very flexible stuff, so I can warp it to mostly anything. Let's just see how hard that would be to get it around him and what that would look like. Does it look silly or does it look... Let's take a look. So if I pull that tight-ish, it looks alright. I feel like I do need to. I feel like that would look quite good. So... I'm sure as hell not right making a knot, a little knot around him, because the problem is a knot shouldn't look so cumbersome, really. But what I can do, yeah, is put that around, back, put it in. Apologies, the camera setup is just, well, we've just got this stand that holds the phone. It's not very professional, unfortunately, so if you're hoping for something more professional, I have to disappoint. Because I don't mind going back onto the topic here. I don't mind obscuring the body details of the goblin because, to be honest, these old Games Workshop goblins, these are just the goblins. They weren't the night goblins or anything. The sculpts are pretty average. Like, there's definitely a timeless quality to them, but at the same time, I don't mind damage How am I going to control this? Right, I'm going to move the camera so I can actually focus. Alright, I'm back. So I just need to focus on trying to wrap these leather rope around his waist, but you can see there, he's got a leather rope now around his waist, holding him firm to the netting structure, to his saddle, as it were, that I've made. There's the saddle from behind, and I hope you can appreciate how he's looks like he's kind of tied in there. That's the kind of look I've got going. Hey, I think that's pretty cool. So the last little bit that will go on here, just to make it a little bit more fun, I have obviously from my big collection of Goblins a selection of Snotlings, and so this particular one, who looks like he's holding perhaps some flammable liquid that can then be applied to the arrows, will be affixed maybe on the side or something like that, ready to help out. How he stays on there, who no one knows. He doesn't have any kind of asphyxiation. He probably just has to hold on for dear little green life. But sitting on there, he shall be. But yeah, that will go very last. So let's just finish off with the explosive arrow. So firstly, I'm going to remove the arrowhead that is currently there. So, there we go. Nice smooth finish. Then let's get one of these adrenal glands. So you can see how it's attached to the sprue there. So let's just file down the back of the adrenal gland, which is nice and flat, and that is where I will be gluing the shaft of the arrow, which is now nice and flat too. That's where I'll be gluing it to. And so hopefully it will go on without too much fuss, says I. I'll put a little bit of glue. I think I'll put it on this instead. Now let's try to clumsily affix. Oh, and there you go, clumsy, right from the get-go. I drop the tiny adrenal. Trying to make sure it's pointing up. And there you have it. His explosive arrow. Painted right, it should look a bit more like an explosive arrow and less like an adrenal gland, but we'll see. So, I now have a pretty convincing Winggit from an evening's conversion. Got my saddle here, made of some goblin nets. Got my goblin wolf rider body and legs. I have arms and quivers from the Rabble kit, the plastic kit. And then I use some leather rope just to make it look a bit more like you could feasibly do this. Ooh, just straighten it up a bit. I had to go touch it, didn't I? Can't help it. There we go. So, that is one of two Goblin Winggits. I bought from the UK, from the Mythforged Etsy shop, two of these ravens, so giant crows, and so I plan to do them up with slightly different goblins, so that it'll diversify them, and yeah, this is my Goblin Winggit. I was inspired by On Goblin Facebook page on the Kings of War Goblins, as well as on Fanatics, other people having converted up their Winggits, because they're actually quite hard to get. They're in rather short supply around the world, and if not for their benefits for war machines, but also just for the fact that they're the only goblin flyer, they are a very useful piece to have. and so I wanted to make my own that would fit my own army that won't really have any gizmos, and this seemed the most cool way to do it. So let me know what you think of this particular model. I will definitely be showing it as it starts getting painted up, so that hopefully anyone who's not convinced by this conversion will be convinced at that point. But for now, this is what it looks like. We have our Goblin riding and ready to bring down some annoying destruction from his big crow. I definitely recommend Mythforged. Their packaging was fantastic. The model, the detail on this sculpt is awesome. Look at that. The feathers, obviously this is a giant model. It has that flexibility of printed resin, but I really like it. Really cool. And now it's cooler because it's got a goblin on it. Very good. So let me know if you guys have been converting anything, and any other ideas for ways to make Winggits. Happy to hear about it, and also any other sources for things like the Fairy Village, because of the Fairy Village available at my local craft store, these are the only two buildings that didn't seem overtly cutesy. They had some more, but they were covered in flowers, and I definitely don't... I mean, flowers can be creepy, but not with goblins. Maybe if I was doing, like, you know, Twilight Kin or something, you could have creepy nightshades and stuff like that, but not with goblins. I don't think flowers quite works, because then you start thinking they're garden gnomes. I don't really want to go down that path. So instead, I got the Mushroom Hut and the Stumpy Hut, and so if you know other ones that I can get, and not too expensive, because these are like $10 Australian, then that would be perfect. But yeah, leave a like and subscribe if you don't mind seeing this kind of crafty video. I hope to be able to make some bloody battle reports eventually, but we're still in lockdown, so crafting videos is all I can do. All I can do is show you my hobby, because that's literally all I can achieve. I do play on Tabletop Simulator occasionally, but we are getting a little bit sick of it, because yeah, you can only play on Tabletop Simulator for so long before you just really want to roll some of your own dice. So until that point, it'll just have to be hobby videos and things I think about to do with the hobby, but actual battle reports, while I really like making them, we'll have to hold off for now. So yeah, leave a comment and let me know what you think about this conversion and what ones you might be doing. Bye!